You already know that rice is one of the most controversial foods when it comes to blood sugar. Some doctors tell you to avoid it entirely. Others say a little bit is fine. And if you're managing diabetes or trying to keep your glucose levels under control, you've probably gotten conflicting advice so many times that you've stopped trusting any of it. That confusion is completely understandable, and honestly, it's not your fault. The information out there is all over the place. But today, we're going to fix that. This video is called How Seniors Should Eat Rice to Lower Blood Sugar and Control Diabetes. And that title is intentional. Not should seniors eat rice. Not is rice bad for you. The question we're answering is how. Because the truth is, rice doesn't have to be your enemy. What matters far more than whether you eat it is how you eat it, what you combine it with, how much you serve yourself, which variety you choose, and critically, what time of day you sit down to that plate. If you've been told to cut rice out of your life entirely, and you've felt deprived, frustrated, or just confused, I want you to stay with me through this whole video, because by the end, you're going to have a completely different understanding of what rice does inside your body, and 5 concrete tools you can start using immediately to make it work for you, instead of against you. But before we get there, I want to ask you something. Have you ever noticed that 2 people can eat the exact same meal and have completely different blood sugar responses? Same dish, same serving size, same time of day, and one person is fine while the other spikes. That's not a coincidence, and it's not just genetics. There's a biological reason for it, and it has everything to do with something called resistant starch. I'll explain exactly what that is, and more importantly, how you can create it in your own kitchen with the rice you probably already have at home. We'll come back to this. I've spent a significant amount of time synthesizing research on dietary glycemic response, aging metabolism, and practical nutrition for people over 60. This isn't a video built on one study or one doctor's opinion. The strategies I'm sharing today are backed by consistent findings across multiple clinical contexts, and they've been adapted specifically for senior bodies. Because the way we process carbohydrates at 65 is genuinely different from how we process them at 35. The hormonal environment is different. The gut microbiome is different. The muscle mass that helps absorb glucose is different. What works for a younger person may not work as well for you. And that's something most mainstream nutrition content simply doesn't address. Hold on a second. Before we go any further, I've put something together for you. It's called the Glucose Paradox. It's a free guide on blood sugar and diabetes, and you can grab it for free through the link in the description. I'm telling you this now because I want you to finish this video with a concrete tool in your hands. To get it right away, just click the link in the description, head over to my site, and drop your email. You'll receive the guide in your inbox a few minutes later. But I don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's get back to the video. Let's start with what is genuinely one of the most fascinating and underutilized strategies in blood sugar management, a technique I call the cooling method. And once you understand the science behind it, I think you'll feel the same way I did the first time I came across this research, a little amazed that nobody talks about it more. When you cook rice the conventional way, boiling it, serving it hot, the starch molecules inside each grain are fully hydrated and gelatinized. That's a scientific way of saying they're in a form that your digestive enzymes can break down almost immediately. Your small intestine gets to work within minutes, and glucose enters your bloodstream quickly and in large amounts. That's the blood sugar spike. That's what we're trying to prevent. But here's where it gets interesting. When you cook that same rice and then refrigerate it for at least 12 hours, something remarkable happens at the molecular level. The starch undergoes a process called retrogradation. The starch molecules, which were opened and gelatinized by heat, begin to reorganize themselves into a tighter, more crystalline structure. And in that new structure, they become resistant to your digestive enzymes. They pass through your small intestine, largely undigested, and instead of spiking your blood sugar, they travel to your large intestine, where they act like fiber, feeding beneficial bacteria, supporting gut health, and having virtually no impact on your glucose levels. This transformed starch is called resistant starch, and it is not a small effect. Research has shown that the cooling process can increase the resistant starch content of rice by a meaningful percentage, enough to measurably reduce the glycemic response when that rice is consumed. And here's the part that surprises most people. You can reheat the rice after it's been cooled, and you will not lose this benefit. The structural change that occurred during refrigeration is largely preserved even when you warm the rice back up, so you're not eating cold rice out of obligation. You cook it the night before, put it in the fridge, and the next day you reheat it however you like in a pan, in the microwave, and you're still getting the benefit of that resistant starch conversion. For seniors managing blood sugar, this is genuinely significant. It's not a drug, it's not a supplement, it's a shift in how you prepare a food you were probably already eating, and it costs absolutely nothing to implement. Now, the cooling method is powerful, but it works even better when combined with smart meal composition. And this brings us to the second strategy, which is about what you eat alongside your rice. One of the most common mistakes people make with rice, and with carbohydrates in general, is eating them alone. A bowl of plain rice, even if it's been cooled and reheated properly, still delivers carbohydrates that your body needs to process. The speed at which those carbohydrates affect your blood sugar depends enormously on what else is in your stomach at the same time. Protein, fat, and fiber all act as natural moderators of glucose absorption. When you eat protein alongside a carbohydrate-rich food, your digestive process slows down. The presence of protein stimulates the release of hormones that signal fullness and modulate the speed at which your stomach empties its contents into the small intestine. When the small intestine receives food more slowly, glucose enters your bloodstream more gradually. The spike is flattened into a gentler curve. Healthy fats work in a similar way. The presence of fat in a meal further delays gastric emptying and creates a buffer effect on glucose absorption. This is why a meal that contains olive oil or avocado alongside rice produces a very different blood sugar response than plain rice with nothing else. So in practice, here's what this looks like. If you're going to have rice, it should never sit on the plate alone. It should be accompanied by a meaningful serving of lean protein, grilled chicken, baked fish, a couple of poached eggs, canned sardines in olive oil, and alongside that protein, there should be a source of healthy fat, and ideally some fiber from vegetables, a drizzle of olive oil over cooked vegetables, half an avocado on the side, a handful of leafy greens with a simple vinaigrette. That combination, resistant starch from cooled and reheated rice, protein, healthy fat, and fiber, creates what I think of as a nutritional buffer. Your blood sugar still rises, as it naturally will with any carbohydrate, but it rises gently and steadily rather than sharply and rapidly. This matters even more as we get older, because our insulin sensitivity naturally declines with age. The pancreas still produces insulin, but the body's cells don't respond to it as efficiently. That means any given amount of carbohydrate will tend to produce a larger blood sugar response in a person over 60 than it would in someone younger. Building that buffer around your rice isn't optional. For seniors managing diabetes or pre-diabetes, it's essential. The third strategy is perhaps the most straightforward, and yet it's the one people most often resist. It's portion control. Specifically, it's understanding that even with the cooling method and perfect meal composition, there is a ceiling on how much rice a senior body can handle without a significant glucose spike. The recommendation I want you to hold on to is this: half a cup of cooked rice per meal. That's the ceiling. Not a full cup, not the generous serving you might get at a restaurant. Half a cup, measured after cooking, not before. It sounds modest, and if you're accustomed to larger portions, it may feel genuinely insufficient at first. But here's the thing: when you apply all 5 of these strategies together, that half cup of rice becomes part of a complete, satisfying meal. The protein fills you up, the fat sustains you, the fiber extends the sense of fullness. You won't be hungry an hour later, the way you might be after a bowl of plain white rice twice that size. The reason the ceiling exists is biological. Your muscles, liver, and cells have a limited capacity for glucose uptake at any given moment. When you consume more carbohydrates than that capacity can handle, especially if your insulin sensitivity is reduced, as it often is in people with type 2 diabetes, the excess glucose has nowhere to go. it stays in your bloodstream. And chronically elevated blood sugar, even when it doesn't look alarming in the moment, causes cumulative damage to blood vessels, nerves, and organs over time. Half a cup isn't a punishment. It's a boundary that respects what your body can actually do. Now, within that half-cup boundary, there's still a meaningful decision to make. Which type of rice are you choosing? Not all rice is created equal, and the differences in glycemic impact between varieties are significant enough to matter for someone managing blood sugar. The best choice among what we typically think of as real rice, the kind that looks and tastes like traditional rice, is Basmati. Basmati has a measurably lower glycemic index than most other white rices, including the standard long-grain white rice you'll find in most American pantries. Part of this is due to its particular starch composition. Basmati contains a higher proportion of amylose compared to amylopectin. Amylose is a form of starch that is digested more slowly and produces a more gradual rise in blood sugar. It also responds particularly well to the cooling method. The resistant starch conversion is more pronounced in rices with higher amylose content. Brown rice is another solid option, and it's often the first thing people reach for when they're trying to eat more carefully. The bran layer that remains intact in brown rice contains fiber, vitamins, and minerals that are stripped away in white rice. That fiber slows digestion. The glycemic response to brown rice is generally lower than white rice. But here's the important caveat. Brown rice is not a free pass. It still contains carbohydrates. Portion control still applies, and some people, particularly those with digestive sensitivities, find that the bran in brown rice causes discomfort, especially when consumed in larger amounts. So brown rice is better, but it isn't unlimited. Wild rice is arguably the best choice of all, though it has a texture and flavor profile that takes some adjustment. Botanically, wild rice isn't actually rice. It's a semi-aquatic grass native to North America. But it's used and served in all the ways rice is used and served. Its glycemic impact is lower than any conventional rice variety, and it contains a notably higher amount of protein per serving, which further moderates glucose absorption. If you haven't tried wild rice, I'd encourage you to experiment with it. A blend of wild rice and basmati, cooled overnight and reheated, combined with salmon and roasted vegetables, is a genuinely excellent meal for blood sugar management. What you want to avoid is short-grain white rice. This is the type used in sushi, risotto, and many Asian rice dishes. Its starch composition is the inverse of basmati. It's high in amylopectin, the rapidly digested form of starch, which gelatinizes very easily during cooking and breaks down quickly in your digestive tract. Short-grain white rice has one of the highest glycemic indices of any rice variety. Even with the cooling method, even with protein and fat alongside it, even in small portions, it produces a faster and more significant blood sugar response than other types. It's the one variety I'd ask you to simply set aside. The fifth and final strategy is about timing, and this one connects to something deep in your biology, something that most people have no idea is happening inside their bodies every single day. Your body does not process the same food the same way at every hour of the day. This isn't just about metabolism being faster in the morning. It's about a specific biological mechanism called circadian insulin sensitivity. Throughout the day, your pancreas and muscle tissue follow a rhythm that's synchronized with light and the cycles of waking and sleep. In the morning and midday hours, your cells are primed to receive glucose. Insulin signaling is at its most efficient. Your muscles are active, your liver is in a receptive state, and the glucose you consume moves into cells and gets used for energy relatively efficiently. As the day progresses toward evening, that efficiency declines. By dinner time, your insulin sensitivity is measurably lower than it was at noon. The same portion of rice that your body handled gracefully at lunch will produce a higher blood sugar reading if eaten at 7 in the evening. And critically, when you eat carbohydrates late in the day, the glucose spike that follows can persist into sleep. Overnight, your body isn't moving, isn't metabolically active in the way it is during waking hours, and it has a much harder time clearing that elevated glucose. People who monitor their blood sugar continuously often see this pattern very clearly. A dinner that includes carbohydrates produces a spike that lingers well past midnight, into the early morning hours. For seniors managing diabetes, this overnight hyperglycemia isn't just a number on a screen. It's connected to disrupted sleep quality, increased inflammation, and accelerated vascular damage. It's a pattern worth taking seriously. The practical recommendation is simple. If you want to include rice in your diet, make lunch your rice meal. Eat it midday, when your insulin sensitivity is at its natural peak, and then give yourself the afternoon a walk. Light activity, even just moving around the house to help your muscles absorb and utilize that glucose. By evening, shift toward foods that are lower in carbohydrates: fish, eggs, vegetables, legumes, a small amount of healthy fat. Your dinner can be satisfying and complete without rice, and your overnight blood sugar will reflect that. When you add all 5 of these strategies together, the cooling method to create resistant starch, smart protein and fat combinations to buffer glucose absorption, a half-cup portion ceiling to respect your body's capacity, choosing Basmati or wild rice over high glycemic varieties, and reserving rice for your midday meal, you get something powerful. You get a framework that doesn't require you to eliminate a food you enjoy. You get agency over your own glucose management, and you get a meal that is genuinely delicious. I started this video by asking whether you've noticed that 2 people can eat the same meal and have completely different blood sugar responses. Now you understand a large part of why. It's not fate, it's not random, it's the accumulation of choices, in preparation, in combination, in portion, in variety, in timing, that determines how your body responds to food, and every single one of those choices is within your control. If you've been living with the fear that rice is simply off the table for the rest of your life, I hope this video has given you a different perspective. You don't have to choose between enjoying food and managing your health. With the right approach, those 2 things aren't in conflict at all. You know what the problem is with diabetes and high blood sugar. Most people find out way too late, and by the time they do, they have no idea where to even start. That's why I decided to create a free guide. It's called the Glucose Paradox, and inside, you'll find everything you wish you'd known sooner. I'll explain how blood sugar actually works, and why your body sometimes reacts the exact opposite way you'd expect. That's why it's called a paradox. I've also included concrete habits you can start changing right now, even if you know zero about nutrition or medicine. It's free, you can download it in a second, and it might be the single most useful thing you do for your health today. Just click the link in the description to head to the site, drop your email, and get the guide sent straight to you. Don't put this off.